No, wait, the victory guy? Yeah.
All right, so good morning, everyone. So where are we holding? We started to introduce this new idea, or not this new idea, we started to introduce this component of the story that the story, the struggle began as religious persecution and then occupation. The core of the issue is not occupation. There was occupation. The Greeks occupied the land of Israel, but that alone did not spark any battle. Battle was sparked only once religious persecution began, and that sparked the battle. And we're introducing this to attempt to explain why the Alanism includes the Alanism, which is describing the miracles that God did for us, which describe the victory in battle, describes mighty in the hands of the wicked, in the hands of the weak. Okay, that's miraculous. Many in the hands of the few, that's miraculous. But why include pure in the hands of the impure in the hands of the pure, wanton sinners in the hands of those who study Torah, wicked in the hands of the righteous? How does that add to the miracle? So at the moment we're suggesting it doesn't add to the miracle, but it tells you the storyline, because the battle was primarily a religious one, and therefore to describe the victory, you have to describe a religious victory. You have to describe how we successfully remove the shackles of religious persecution. Otherwise, the victory is incomplete. In fact, that would be the main point would be missing. Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is what we're suggesting right now. Clear? With me or not?
I really don't know what you're talking about.
The Alanism, right? We're talking about this last few days. The Alanism describes how Hashem delivered our enemies into our hands. Yeah. It describes this deliverance in 5 different ways. You delivered the strong in the hands of the weak. That's miraculous. Okay. You delivered the many in the hands of the few. That's miraculous. You delivered the pure in the hands of the impure. How is that miraculous? You delivered the wicked in the hands of the righteous. How is that miraculous? Mm. You delivered the wanton sinners into the hands of those who study Torah. How is that miraculous? Mm. So why are those 3 following?
I think that I mean I have to see the text for context.
We read it the last few days. You delivered these into the hands of these, right? Get a siddur and be easier.
Yeah.
Get an English siddur.
What I always wanted to ask you, a broader question yesterday was when was the siddur formulated, and why are we trying to figure out the nuances of the text?
At this juncture, okay, it's a question.
The siddur was presumably put together with all that background knowledge already from Gemara or something.
Yeah.
Already.
So by the time the Gemara comes around, the text is probably already formulated. It's formulated at least initially by the Anshe Knesset Agdola, and then formulated throughout the Sanhedrin over time.
Right.
At this point,
presumably those answers.
It would have been formulated already.
Those the reasons.
I don't want to take much time because we read this over the last 2 days.
Right.
Sorry. Yeah. Sorry.
No.
If you don't understand, it's not no point forward. Can't follow. Come on. Okay. So we're saying thank you, Hashem. In times of the Chazbanai, we delivered us. Our enemies stood up against us to fight us. They tried to impose religious persecution, and you delivered us. And then this is how it describes the delivery. You delivered the hands of the mighty into the hands of the weak, the hands of the many, the hands of the few.
Right.
Yeah, right. To those, that's miraculous.
Those are good things.
They're all good things, but they are miraculous. And we're thanking Hashem al HaNisim for the miracles.
Right.
And then it goes on to describe, you delivered the hands of the pure, the impure into the hands of the pure. Why is that miraculous?
Once wanton sinners.
Wanton people who just sin freely, you don't care.
Yeah.
Into the hands of those who study Torah, us Jews.
So you're delivering sinners into the hands of those who study Torah.
Correct. The Maccabees being the one who studied Torah, and their enemies being the ones who were wanton sinners. Right? But if you're describing the miracle, you're trying to praise how impossible the war was. What does their sinning or righteousness or purity have to do that?
Yeah, well, it's not impossible that a sinner can become righteous.
That's not what we're saying.
Oh.
Okay, read the text. We're not talking about making tshuva.
Right, exactly.
We're talking about our enemies being wicked, being delivered into our hands. Right. Delivered into our hands doesn't mean we made them from. Delivered into our hands, we beat them. Right? So how do those descriptions add to the miraculousness of the story?
Okay.
That's the question, clear?
Right, yeah.
Mighty into the hands of the weak, that adds to the miracle, because usually the mighty wins. Many into the hands of the few, that adds to the miracle, because usually the many win.
I was reading this yesterday, where it says Rav said rebound, then the Dinan.
Yeah, okay, good, we're clear?
Okay, yeah.
Clear so far?
Yeah.
Okay, so why are those descriptions given? So now our suggested answer is because that's the essence of the battle. The battle was not a physical one. It started out as a spiritual one. It was
Right.
religious persecution. So if we beat them and we still have religious persecution, that wouldn't be a victory, right? So you got to describe the victory. And the victory is that now the wicked are in the hands of the righteous. Clear? Is where we are so far.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, the siddur would have been formulated at this point. But even if not, the fact, even if it was formulated later, the question still remains, why is it formulated in such and such a way?
Well,
Even if it
who
was formulated later.
That's my these are questions I don't want to go off topic, but
I couldn't give the exact date, but even if it wasn't formulated till 100 years later,
obviously it was formulated in this way
for a purpose.
for the purpose.
Exactly. So even if it was formulated 100 years later, the question would still remain. We'd still be analyzing it, even if it was formulated 500 years later. But it's a precise text that all Jews share. So clearly there's some meaning to it, even if it was formulated later. But I believe it's already formulated at this point. Yeah, we clear?
Yeah.
So let's see Bays. Let's see whatever says inside. Yeah, Bays inside. On page 210 on the left. Seemingly, we can suggest to explain why these descriptions are given when they seemingly add nothing to the value of the miracle. That which Alanism says, you deliver the hands of the pure into the hands of the pure, etc. You see it?
Yeah.
Is relevant to that which it says earlier. Earlier in the Alanism, it says, in describing the persecution, it says, when the evil, wicked Greek sovereignties rose up against Jewish people to oppress them. What did they do? They tried to make us forget your Torah. They tried to make us move away from your commandments. End quote. So the Alanism itself describes the persecution not as occupation simply, but as occupation plus persecution, religious persecution. That's how it's described. That's how the stress is described, yes? Meaning to say, not just a literal battle, but a religious persecution, which is a spiritual battle. And therefore it's understood. When we describe the victory of the Jewish people afterwards, and the description must include not only the success of the military, but also and not just also, but actually primarily as the spiritual victory. Overcoming the religious persecution. Clear? We're thanking Hashem for the miracle of the story. They persecuted us. They tried to make us stop our religion. We beat them. That was miraculous. And now, thankfully, we can serve you. Because otherwise, we're not finishing the storyline. Yes? Clear? Therefore, that the Alanism says, you delivered to Mayim Biat Tahirim, the impure in the hands of the pure, Rishayim Biat Tzadikim, the wicked in the hands of the righteous, the Zaydim and the wanton sinners Biat in the hands of those who study Torah. Lahadgish to highlight, Lutar, and to describe as the spiritual success of the Jewish people. Even though it adds nothing to the value of the miracle. There's nothing miraculous about the righteous people being in charge. There's nothing miraculous about that. There is something miraculous about the weaker being in charge. There is something miraculous about the few being in charge.
Yeah.
Nothing miraculous about the righteous being in charge. But even though it's not a miracle, it still needs to be described, because otherwise we're not finishing the storyline of what the truth of the miracle, what the truth of the story is. Because the truth of the story is now we successfully got rid of religious persecution. Clear?
Yeah.
So it's not part of the miracle, but it's part of the essence of the storyline. This is what we're suggesting at the moment.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Not everything as part of the story is a miracle, but it's still the details matter.
Oh, that's the point. This, and not just the details matter. This is the essence of the whole story.
Right.
Yeah. There's a lot of details we miss out, but this is the essence of the story. But you're right, that's the point. It's not part of the miracle, but there's nothing wrong with that. You still got to describe it because this is what happened. Not just what happened. This is the center of the whole story. We started with religious persecution. We miraculously beat them, and now no religious persecution. Very good. But the Rebbe is not satisfied by that answer. Not that it's wrong, but we have to add another nuance, and we'll see in a moment what that other nuance is. But seemingly, it's difficult to explain that these details, the pure and the impure in the hands of the pure, the wicked in the hands of the righteous, and the wanton sinners in the hands of those who study Torah, which is said in continuation with the text that is titled, and thank you for the miracles. It's hard to say that they're completely not part of the miracle. The entire thrust of the praise is thank you for the miracles. And then when we come to the actual main part of the story, it doesn't include a miracle.
So
It's almost like the miracle is a side point. The side point that we beat our enemies who are stronger, it's a side point. But the whole text here is to thank you for the mission, for the miracles. That's why it's in that paragraph of Moedim, after Moedim. It's where we think.
And then we're saying.
We're saying thanks for the miracles, but then we describe a whole section that's not even a miracle. So it's true that this is the main part of the story, but somehow it also has to include a miracle. That's what the point they were saying. Now, what they were saying, not saying that this is an incorrect interpretation. It's a correct interpretation because the story does go that there was religious persecution, and the main function of the miracle was to get rid of the religious persecution. True, but that is not a miracle in and of itself, and Rebbe is not satisfied with that. Rebbe wants this to be a miracle too.
I even remember reading fascinatingly yesterday, and then Mosaic pamphlet was saying that there's even like a Chanukah Megillah, and the many communities have the custom of reading the Megillah, but most suffice just for the insert during the Amidah day.
Yeah, the Megillah's Chanukah, Megillah's Hatiyach is called. Well, this is interesting topic itself. We'll leave it alone for now. Okay, so you understand what they were saying? They were saying, yes, it's correct that the essence of the story is the religious persecution and the success of getting rid of that. But Rebbe still wants that this whole description takes up a chunk of the Al-Nissim should include a miracle, considering that the whole prayer here is to thank for the miracle. So where's the miracle in this part? Where's the miracle in this?
I mean, where's the miracle in the spiritual part?
The righteous overpowering the wicked.
Spiritual part.
The spiritual part, yes. Not just that there's a miracle in the physical battle, which led to a spiritual success.
The miracle on the physical plane.
So there's a miracle on the physical plane.
So,
and because of that, therefore now we can live freely. But they ever want that this spiritual battle should also have a miracle, considering that a whole chunk of the blessing, thanking God for the miracle, describes a spiritual success. So the spiritual success must also include a miracle. Ready?
okay, right.
Here comes the main part. So I titled a series on YouTube, Chanukah's True Villain. So we had, let's say, 2 levels so far. The villain could be occupation. And then we learned yesterday and today, no, occupation is not really the real villain. The real villain is religious persecution, not people. They're both the Greeks, they're both the same people. Actually, they're not, because occupation started, the people who lived during the occupation, or missional occupation, probably died by the time the religious persecution came around. Certainly Alexander the Great himself was dead. Maybe some of his successors were still alive, but I don't think so. I think most of them are probably dead by then. So the first generation, which were occupiers, they're not the real villains. Because when that happened, there was no battle yet. We didn't like it, it was uncomfortable.
It was something like 200 years.
Sometime later, there is religious persecution. I don't know if it's 200 years, but it's sometime later.
Long.
There's certainly a few decades.
Peace.
Under the Greeks. I don't know how long it was, but probably a few decades for sure. Maybe more. Okay, so we went from occupation to religious persecution. Now we're going to discover that actually there's a third and more deeper villain of Chanukah. Let's see. Top right-hand corner of 211, first paragraph there. We can suggest, says the Rebbe, the explanation. Here it is. You do what we know. We give that young man in the history of that time. Even though the religious persecution, the decrees against religious practice, Jewish religious practice, which is quoted in the Al-Nissim. The Greek government stood up to make us forget your Torah, to make us move away from your mitzvahs, from your desires. And so it's true. This religious persecution was imposed upon us from the outside by the occupying Greek, evil Greek army. They made decrees upon the Jewish people, and they tried to eradicate our religion. Did not allow the Jewish people to be involved in Torah mitzvahs. So it's true that that religious persecution was a big villain here. Nevertheless, they were not the real villain. Here's the real villain. There were many, many Jewish people. Those who have Greekified. Which joined the Greeks. In addition to those who were forced into joining the Greeks, there were those who willingly joined into the Greeks. To the point that only a minority of the Jewish people remained wholesome in their open and observant connection with God. So what's the real villain? Not occupation, not religious persecution, but assimilation.
Right.
Assimilation. That was the real villain here.
Still is.
Still is. Oh, which is why you talked about yesterday. People say that Hanukkah is the first Zionist battle. Not. It's the first Hasidic battle.
Mhm.
Fight against assimilation. Actually, not the first, because Ezra was the first to fight against assimilation. The truth is, the prophets of old all fought against assimilation. You read in the prophets, they're trying to stop the Jewish people from marrying into the Philistines or whatever. But in mass, since the first place was destroyed, Ezra fought to stop religious assimilation. And here too, and this is what we were explaining yesterday. Because the occupation to begin with was not a violent one, precisely because it wasn't violent, it actually attracted many Jews. Because Alexander came to the land of Israel, fascinated by the whole thing with Judaism. How's that? Very simple. The Greeks lived in a polytheistic society, pagan polytheistic society. So they understood every city
Phenomenon.
has its strength, has its power. We'll call it their god. We spoke about this once before, but you can imagine in modern times. In New York, they worship the god of money. In Florida, they worship the god of pleasure. In LA, they worship the god of fame. I don't know, probably some other cities have other gods that they worship. Yeah. So every city had their gods in the old day. And what was the battle? Which god's greater? Which would be like almost the modern equivalent of saying, which culture is greater? Right? So Alexander comes to Jerusalem and says, okay, well, what's your God? And the Jews say, our God? No. One God. One God? What are you talking about? And the Jews say, yeah, all these different powers you're talking about, they're meaningless. They're only tools that this one great God who controls the entire universe has everything. Those individual powers you're talking about have no free will. They're not independent from each other. They're all one. Hashem Echad. This is a new philosophy that Alexander never heard of. He's sat down. I want to study.
Yeah.
And if you look at the Gemara, it's a whole new way of looking at life. And there's one truth and power that runs through everything. We spoke about this when we spoke about the uniqueness of Avraham. Right? We spoke about this recently. When did we speak about it? We spoke about it in the context of what? In the context of the Akedah, we spoke about this. Right? Why people were sacrificing their children. Why people sacrificing their children to their gods. People do it all the time. People sacrifice their kids for money. That's not sacrificing your kid for a god. That is. Yeah, it's a different god, a god of money.
The handbag.
Yeah, the handbag. You sacrifice your kid to the almighty algorithm. I don't know. People sacrifice their kids for all kinds of things. Right? But the Jewish people came along and said, no, there's no sacrificing your kid or anything for any particular power. There's only one truth that runs all these powers you're talking about. There's one God. So Alexander's fascinated. And indeed, if you go to the Gemara, we have many discussions of Greek philosophers discussing their thinking with the sages. And all of these discussions revolve around this one question. Does not the world seem to have multiple powers? Why are you saying there's only one? And the Chacham explaining how there's only one. Okay, so with that, along with the Jewish people impressing the Greeks, comes the downside of the unfortunate Greeks impressing the Jews. So many Jews assimilated. Said, wow, look at this theater, art, sports, Olympics. This is wonderful. Precisely because because the occupation wasn't persecution at the beginning, is precisely why it was so alluring. It was only when there was a certain pocket of Jews that resisted the assimilation, that's what invited the persecution. You're resisting it, you're not falling for it happily, we're going to force you. We're going to force you. The truth is, Russian history very much matches this. The Russian czars were constantly dealing with their Jewish problem. You have this group of people that they're not part of everybody. So even before communism, the different czars took different approaches. Some czars took the approach of, we're going to force you to Russify, and others took the approach of, we're going to lax and infiltrate your schools and just let you assimilate way in. And in each time, they were successful to one degree or another.
It's kind of like what happened in Egypt. I mean, it was first a very subtle way of becoming assimilated. And then at some point,
At some
it
point,
wasn't an invitation to assimilate, it became a forced assimilation.
exactly, when there's a certain group of people that
Once you
refuse
have
to
a good
assimilate,
hold on them, and then
right.
you go.
when there's a certain group of people that refuse to assimilate, then they say, okay, you know what? If you're not taking this freely, you're gonna have to come to us by the sword.
Right.
And that's when the battle begins physically. Okay, so the miracle, the villain is not occupation, it's not persecution, it's assimilation. Now we're going to see. So how does that act in the miracle? Why does it make it more miraculous? We'll see on Monday, because what's the miracle? The miracle here is that Hashem provides a miracle even from the minority of Jews. Even when the majority of Jews are sinning, Hashem still provides a miracle for the minority. That's a miracle. By the order of events, Hashem should look at the nation of the Jewish people and say, 1 second, the majority of you assimilated. Be gone with you. And Hashem says, no. Even though it's only a minority, they're staying true to me, I'm still going to do a miracle. And that's how the description of, so actually, who are the wicked and who are the impure and who are the wanton sinners that the Alanism is describing? Not the Greeks. It's describing the assimilated Jews. They were the ones that were delivered into the hands of the righteous. And that's truly miraculous. It's truly miraculous that a minority of Jews should invoke a miracle against the majority of Jews who are not worthy of a miracle, so to speak. That's the real miracle. We're going to see more on that on Monday with Hashem's help.
Yeah.
Stuff.
So it's supposed to
It's nice to see how these stories parallel mamish what we're going through today.
yeah, to being an enemy is one thing, but then to save an assimilated Jew, that's like almost a bigger victory.
Bigger miracle than
Yeah,
fighting the communists is fighting the assimilated Canadian American Jew.
yeah.
That's exactly the point. That's the real Hanukkah.
It's a silent battle.
That's exactly where we're going. That's the real Hanukkah.
Yeah,
Okay, have a good day, Eden.
yeah.